The weapons training bay smelled like ozone and recycled air, which Cressida had long ago accepted as the natural scent of her life. She stood at the equipment rack, methodically checking plasma cells with the enthusiasm of someone alphabetizing their own autopsy reports. The harsh overhead lighting made everything look slightly clinical, which matched her mood perfectly. Behind her, 17 cadets were supposed to be running targeting drills. The holographic projections flickered across the sterile white walls, creating dancing shadows that at least provided some visual interest to an otherwise monumentally boring Tuesday morning. Zarketh, the Drakmorian exchange cadet, had been attempting to calibrate his training rifle for the past 6 minutes. His massive frame hunched over the weapon with surprising delicacy, both scaled arms working the mechanism while his long tail swept back and forth across the rubberized floor. The emerald and obsidian scales covering his muscular form caught the light at odd angles, creating patterns that Cressida's peripheral vision kept interpreting as movement. She'd been specifically told that having an apex war species in basic weapons training was a cultural exchange opportunity and very important for interspecies relations. What they'd actually meant was that nobody else wanted to deal with the paperwork. The Drakmorian's molten gold eyes set beneath that heavy ridged brow narrowed in concentration. His angular jaw worked slightly, subtle fangs just visible as he muttered something in his native language. The crown-like horns sweeping back from his skull nearly scraped the ceiling when he stood at full height. Cressida was filling out a maintenance log when she felt the touch. 2 scaled fingers, surprisingly warm, wrapped around her holster with what could only be described as casual familiarity. Not grabbing the weapon itself, just the holster, the way you might tap someone's shoulder or adjust their collar. She looked down at the emerald-scaled hand on her hip, looked up at Zarketh, who was now standing directly beside her, his 7'4" frame radiating what he probably thought was friendliness. His scales had lightened slightly, the emerald tones more prominent. His tail did a little swish. "Good morning, instructor," he said, his voice a deep rumble. His hand remained on her holster. Cressida's expression didn't change. "Cadet, the weather simulation in the Habitat Dome is very pleasant today." "That's nice." Her voice remained flat. "Your hand is on my weapon." Zarketh's golden eyes blinked, all that heavy brow structure making the gesture look particularly pronounced. "Yes, I am greeting you with proper respect. By touching my holster." "Of course." He seemed genuinely pleased that she'd noticed. "Among my people, this shows trust and camaraderie. We only touch a warrior's weapon harness if we consider them worthy of respect and friendship." Cressida stared at him, then at his hand, then back at him. "Get your hand off my weapon." The Drakmorian scales flickered slightly darker, patches of obsidian spreading across the emerald. "Ah, but I am showing you honor. Get your hand off my weapon." Zarketh's tail stopped swishing. His breathing vents along his jawline released a small, confused hiss, but he removed his hand, both arms now hanging uncertainly at his sides. The natural armored plating across his shoulders seemed to shift position slightly, flaring outward just a fraction. Cressida pulled out her datapad with deliberate slowness. "Name. You know my name, instructor. We have trained together for 3 weeks. Name." Zarketh's scales were definitely darker now, approaching full obsidian. "Zarketh of the Drakmorian 3rd Clutch." "Congratulations, Zarketh. You just earned yourself a formal disciplinary report." The massive reptilian's jaw went slightly slack, fangs now clearly visible. "But I was greeting you. You touched an instructor's weapon without permission. That's a Category 4 violation. I did not touch the weapon, only the harness. Same difference." Zarketh's tail lashed once against the floor with an audible thump. Several cadets at the far end of the training bay glanced over, then quickly returned to their drills. "Instructor Cressida, I meant no disrespect. In my culture." "We're not in your culture. We're in my weapons bay, where you don't touch people's holsters." The Drakmorian's breathing had become more audible, a soft hissing that accompanied each exhale. His scales were now almost entirely obsidian, the emerald only showing in thin streaks. "I apologize profusely. I did not understand." Apology noted and rejected. Cressida was already typing. "You'll report to security for processing." "Processing?" Zarketh's armored plating flared wider. "But this is a misunderstanding. What this is a clear violation of Academy Weapons Protocol, Section 7, Subsection 3. The training bay had gone very quiet. Even the holographic targets seemed to have frozen mid-rotation. Zarketh drew himself up to his full height, which meant his horns definitely scraped the ceiling now. A small piece of acoustic tile drifted down. His golden eyes had gone very wide. I am a warrior of the Drakmorian matriarchy. My family has led fleets for 7 generations. I have trained since hatching in the arts of combat and honor. I would never. Great. You can explain all that to security. Cressida looked up from her datapad. You're dismissed from today's training. Collect your gear and report to Officer Barnaby in the security office within 10 minutes. But 9 minutes now. Zarketh's tail coiled tight against his leg, which every cadet in the bay had learned meant he was either extremely stressed or about to break something. His scales had gone so dark he looked like a living shadow with gold eyes. The fangs were fully visible now, though Cressida noted with detached interest that he wasn't showing any actual aggression, just profound mortification. Instructor, please, I'm begging you to understand. 8 minutes. The Drakmorian made a sound like a kettle releasing pressure. Then he turned, moving with surprising grace for something his size, and began gathering his training equipment. His movements were precise, but his tail kept twitching, betraying his agitation. The armored plating across his body remained flared outward, making him look even more massive than usual. Cressida watched him go, then returned to her maintenance log as if nothing had happened. The training bay slowly resumed normal operations, though several cadets were whispering and sneaking glances at both the departing Drakmorian and their apparently unshakable instructor. Barnaby's security office looked like a recycling center had merged with a coffee shop, and then both had died. Flickering monitors covered one wall, displaying various camera feeds from around the academy. His desk had achieved a sort of architectural stability through the careful balance of incident reports, cold beverage cups, and what might have been an old sandwich. He was reviewing a fascinating report about someone stealing all the left boots from the gymnasium when his door chimed. "Come in," he called, not looking up. The door opened, then kept opening. Then something very large and scaled and clearly upset entered his office, horns scraping the doorframe. Barnaby looked up. His datapad slipped from his fingers and clattered onto his desk, knocking over a cold beverage that began dripping onto a pile of reports. Zarketh stood in the doorway, scales still mostly obsidian, tail coiled so tight it looked painful, golden eyes radiating confusion and distress. "Ah," Barnaby said, "you're Zarketh. I have been sent for processing." The Drakmorian's voice sounded like distant thunder filtered through embarrassment. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding." Barnaby grabbed his datapad, noticed it was now covered in old beverage, grabbed a different datapad, and pulled up the incoming reports. "Let's see. W.O.? Oh no. I did not mean to cause offense. You grabbed Instructor Cressida's holster?" I touched it respectfully, as a greeting, in my culture. Barnaby held up one hand, the other already frantically typing on his datapad. Small beads of sweat were forming on his forehead despite the climate-controlled office. Okay, let me see if I can. If we just... His screen pinged. A new notification appeared, then another, then 6 more. "Oh no," Barnaby said again. Zarketh's armored plating flared even wider. "What is wrong?" Cressida filed a formal category, for violation. "Yes," she informed me, which triggered an automatic cultural sensitivity review. "I do not understand," which flagged your diplomatic status. Barnaby was scrolling faster now, his stocky frame leaning forward until his face was inches from the screen, which cross-referenced with the interspecies conduct protocols, which found AWO no. Oh no. Zarketh took one heavy step forward, his digitigrade legs making his gait slightly bird-like despite his massive bulk. "What has been found?" Barnaby looked up, his face now gleaming with sweat. "You're registered as a warrior-class diplomatic representative." "Yes, my family requires." "And under Academy Regulation 473, subsection 12, any physical contact initiated by a warrior-class representative toward Academy staff without consent can be interpreted as a formal challenge." The training bay seemed very far away now. The security office felt very small. Zarketh's scales impossibly darkened further. "A challenge," the Drakmorian repeated slowly. "To combat," Barnaby clarified, unnecessarily. "But I was greeting her." "Right, but the system doesn't know that. The system just knows that you, a registered warrior from a species known for ritual combat, made physical contact with her weapon harness." Zarketh's tail slowly uncurled, then lashed once against the floor. One of Barnaby's monitor stands wobbled. "This is absurd. I'm aware. I must speak with Instructor Cressida immediately. You can't. Once a challenge is filed, protocol requires separation of parties until the review board convenes. When does the board convene? Barnaby checked his datapad. His hand was shaking slightly. 48 hours? 2 days? Standard processing time. Zarketh released a long hiss through his breathing vents. His horns scraped the ceiling as he tilted his head back. This cannot be happening. Barnaby wiped his forehead with his sleeve. I'm going to send an urgent clarification request. Maybe we can get this resolved before. His datapad pinged again. Both of them stared at it. Barnaby opened the notification, read it again, looked up at Zarketh with an expression of a man watching his own funeral arrangements being made. The Commandant's office has been notified, he said quietly. Is that bad? They've scheduled a formal hearing. To explain the misunderstanding? To determine the terms of the duel. In the weapons training bay, Cressida was still filling out her maintenance log. Her beverage had gone cold, but she didn't particularly care. The cadets were running their drills with unusual intensity, nobody wanting to be the next person she noticed. Her datapad chimed. She glanced at it, read the notification, and her expression finally changed, just slightly. One eyebrow raised approximately 3 millimeters. Huh, she said to the empty air. That's new. Then she went back to her paperwork. The Commandant's office had the kind of polished wood desk that suggested someone took furniture very seriously. The massive window behind it overlooked the academy courtyard, where decorative alien plants swayed in the artificial breeze, and a central fountain burbled with what Barnaby assumed was meant to be calming intent. It was not calming him. He stood between Cressida and Zarketh, both of whom were maintaining carefully neutral expressions. Cressida looked like she was waiting for a delayed shuttle. Zarketh looked like a statue of ancient reptilian suffering, his scales still carrying heavy obsidian streaks, his tail coiled so tight it might have been made of stone. The Commandant's desk held exactly 3 items: a formal duel authorization form, a ceremonial blade from some species Barnaby didn't recognize, and what appeared to be a stress ball shaped like a small moon. So, Barnaby said, his datapad clutched against his chest like a shield, there's been a misunderstanding. Cressida didn't look at him. Has there? A significant cultural misunderstanding involving greeting customs and weapon harness etiquette. Sounds fascinating. Zarketh's breathing vents released a small hiss, his molten gold eyes fixed on the fountain outside, as if hoping it might suddenly transform into an escape route. Barnaby wiped his forehead. Instructor Cressida, when you filed the Category 4 violation, did you intend to initiate formal combat proceedings? I intended to file a Category 4 violation. Right, but were you aware that Zarketh's diplomatic status would trigger? I filed what I filed. Yes, but he touched my holster. Zarketh's armored plating flared slightly. I have explained repeatedly that among my people. We're not among your people. I am aware of that now. Are you? Yes? Then why'd you touch my holster? Barnaby made a sound like a small animal in moderate distress. Okay, let's just... Can we all agree that this is ridiculous? No, Cressida said. Yes, Zarketh said simultaneously. The paperwork has been filed, Barnaby continued, his voice taking on the desperate quality of someone explaining why the escape pod won't open. It's gone through 7 different automated systems. There's a formal record now. The duel authorization has been generated. Cressida finally looked at him. So we duel. No! Barnaby's datapad nearly slipped from his sweaty grip. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Why? Why? Because it's a misunderstanding. Or, Cressida said calmly, it's a cadet who needs to learn about boundaries. Zarketh's tail lashed once, striking the floor with enough force to make the ceremonial blade rattle on the desk. I was showing respect. By grabbing my weapon? I did not grab your weapon. Semantics. The Drakmorian drew himself up to his full height, horns nearly touching the ceiling, his massive frame blocking most of the window light. Instructor Cressida, I am a warrior of the 3rd clutch. My family has commanded battle fleets across 4-star systems. I have been trained since hatching in proper combat protocols and honor codes. I would never deliberately insult a fellow warrior, and yet... It was a greeting, noted. Barnaby stepped between them, which was brave considering Zarketh's bulk and Cressida's expression. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Academy Courtyard. Public attendance mandatory per Interspecies Protocol Section 9. Cressida's eyebrow raised slightly. Public? Mandatory, Barnaby repeated miserably. All cadets, all staff, all diplomatic observers. Wonderful. Zarketh's scales darkened another shade. This is a nightmare. This is bureaucracy, Barnaby corrected, which is worse. The detention cell block echoed with every footstep, which seemed intentionally designed to make everyone feel more uncomfortable. Gray walls, force field doors humming at irregular intervals, metal benches that looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought comfort was a structural weakness. Zarketh sat on one such bench which groaned under his weight. His tail draped across the floor, occasionally twitching. His scales had settled into a mottled pattern of emerald and obsidian that suggested profound internal conflict. Barnaby stood outside the force field, datapad in hand, looking like someone who'd been asked to defuse a bomb using only positive thinking. "So," Barnaby said, "I've been reviewing the regulations." Zarketh's golden eyes fixed on him with desperate hope. "You have found a solution?" "I've found 17 regulations, 3 subclauses, and one very confusing footnote about sandwich protocols. I do not understand how sandwiches are relevant." "They're not. That's the problem. I'm losing my mind." Barnaby wiped his forehead. "Okay, here's what I've got. The duel authorization is legally binding once filed. This, I know. But the terms of the duel can be modified up until the moment of combat." Zarketh's armored plating shifted slightly. "Modified how?" "That's where it gets weird. According to Regulation 644, subsection 7, the challenged party gets to choose the method of combat. Instructor Cressida chooses? Yes. What are the options?" Barnaby scrolled through his datapad. Armed melee, unarmed melee, ranged weapons, technological combat, strategic simulation, or... That's teen sick. He squinted at the screen. Philosophical debate? Philosophical debate? Apparently it's from the Zenth Treaty of 228-7. Nobody's used it in 40 years. Zarketh stood, his full height making the cell seem significantly smaller. "Then we must convince Instructor Cressida to choose philosophical debate." "Have you met Cressida?" "Yes." "Then you know she's not choosing philosophical debate." The Drakmorian's tail lashed in frustration. "There must be something, some loophole, some exception." "There is one thing," Barnaby said slowly. "It's weird. I will accept weird. Regulation 646 allows for challenge withdrawal if both parties formally acknowledge mutual respect and submit to cultural sensitivity training." Zarketh's scales lightened slightly, emerald tones returning. "That is reasonable. I respect Instructor Cressida greatly. I will acknowledge this immediately." "You have to acknowledge it publicly, in front of the Academy, during the hearing." "I can do that. And Cressida has to acknowledge respecting you back." The emerald tones faded. "Ah, yeah. She will not do that." "Probably not." Zarketh sat back down, the bench groaning again. His horns drooped slightly, which Barnaby hadn't known was possible. "I am doomed." "We're all doomed," Barnaby said. "I have to organize this whole thing. Do you know how much paperwork a formal duel requires? 17 forms? 17? You have my sympathy." "I don't want sympathy. I want this to not be happening." They sat in miserable silence for a moment, the force field humming between them. "Officer Barnaby," Zarketh said quietly, "what happens if we actually have to duel?" Barnaby checked his datapad. "According to protocol, first blood ends it. No permanent damage required. And if Instructor Cressida draws first blood, you get a formal mark on your record and mandatory combat ethics training. And if I draw first blood, same thing, plus you have to write a 5-page essay on cultural sensitivity." Zarketh's tail twitched. "I am a warrior of the third clutch. I do not write essays." "Then don't make your instructor bleed." "I do not wish to make anyone bleed. I wished only to greet her respectfully." "I know," Barnaby said tiredly. "The universe is stupid." The Academy courtyard had been transformed into what could only be described as an amphitheater of poor life choices. Cadets lined the stone pathways, sitting on benches and standing in clusters near the decorative alien plants. The fountain burbled away in the background, providing inappropriate cheerfulness to the proceedings. Someone had set up a raised platform in the center of the space. Someone else had marked out a combat circle with glowing tape. A third person, demonstrating either optimism or dark humor, had positioned a medical station at the edge of the courtyard. The medic stood near it, looking bored and checking supplies with the enthusiasm of someone who'd seen this kind of thing before and knew it would be monumentally stupid. Barnaby stood at the edge of the platform, datapad clutched in both hands, sweating despite the pleasant simulated weather. His uniform looked like he'd slept in it, which he had, because he'd spent all night trying to find loopholes in interspecies combat law. Cressida approached from the west entrance, moving through the crowd with the casual energy of someone walking to a mildly interesting training exercise. Her uniform was clean but still coffee-stained. Her expression suggested she was thinking about lunch. Zarketh emerged from the east entrance, and the crowd's murmuring increased considerably. His full height and bulk made him look like a monument to ancient warfare. His scales had settled into pure emerald, which Barnaby's frantic research suggested meant acceptance of fate. The crown-like horns caught the artificial sunlight, his armored plating gleamed, and his long tail dragged behind him with ominous purpose. They reached the platform simultaneously, climbing up from opposite sides. Barnaby positioned himself between them, which felt increasingly like a bad survival strategy. "Right," he said, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat. "We are here to address the formal challenge issued between Instructor Cressida and Cadet Zarketh of the Drakmorian Third Clutch." The courtyard had gone very quiet. Even the fountain seemed to burble more softly. "Before we proceed," Barnaby continued, reading from his datapad with shaking hands, "I must ask if either party wishes to withdraw the challenge by mutual acknowledgement of respect and commitment to cultural sensitivity training." Cressida said nothing. Zarketh's breathing vents released a small hiss. "Instructor Cressida?" Barnaby prompted. "Nope." "Cadet Zarketh?" The Drakmorian's golden eyes fixed on Cressida. "I acknowledge that Instructor Cressida is a skilled warrior deserving of respect. I meant no disrespect in my greeting. I humbly request that we resolve this misunderstanding through diplomatic means." The crowd murmured approvingly. Cressida looked at her fingernails. "He touched my holster." The murmuring stopped. "Right," Barnaby said weakly. "So we're proceeding. As the challenged party, Instructor Cressida, you have the right to choose the method of combat." "Armed melee," Cressida said immediately. Zarketh's scales flickered darker. "Instructor, training weapons, first blood, standard rules." Barnaby typed frantically. "Noted. Cadet Zarketh, do you accept these terms?" The Drakmorian stood very still, his tail coiled tight. His armored plating had begun flaring outward again. "I do not wish to fight Instructor Cressida. That's not the question. I respect her greatly. Do you accept the terms?" Zarketh's jaw worked, fangs just visible. His breathing had become audible to the entire courtyard. Finally, his shoulders sagged slightly, which on his frame looked like a building settling. "I accept." The crowd erupted in excited whispers. Barnaby wanted to cry, but settled for excessive sweating. "Weapons will be distributed. Combatants will take positions. On my mark." "Wait," Cressida said. Everyone froze. She looked at Zarketh, her expression unchanged. "You grabbed my holster, right?" The Drakmorian scales went completely obsidian. "I touched it, yes, as a gesture of—" "You touched it with your hand." "Yes." "Your right hand?" Yes." Cressida nodded slowly. "So by your culture's logic, that was your right hand showing respect to my weapon." That is correct." Zarketh sounded confused and terrified in equal measure. "Which means," Cressida continued, still in that same flat tone, "that your right hand now owes my weapon a debt of honor." Barnaby's datapad nearly fell again. "What?" "Drakmorian Combat Honor Code," Cressida said. "Section 12. Any limb that touches another warrior's weapon without permission must demonstrate respect through service or combat." Zarketh's golden eyes went very wide. "You know our honor codes?" "I read the orientation materials." "Nobody reads the orientation materials," Barnaby whispered. Cressida ignored him. "So here's the thing, Cadet. Your right hand owes my weapon respect. You can demonstrate that respect by fighting me, which seems excessive. Or, Zarketh leaned forward slightly, his entire massive frame radiating desperate hope. "Or your right hand can serve my weapon's honor by maintaining it for the rest of the semester. Cleaning, calibration, repairs. Every week. Personally." The courtyard had gone silent again. Barnaby checked his datapad frantically. That's actually in the code. Subsection 4, honor debt can be satisfied through dedicated service." "I know," Cressida said. Zarketh's scales began shifting, obsidian fading to emerald so quickly it looked like a color change effect. "You would accept this? You would allow me to maintain your weapons as honor service?" "Sure, I would be honored to." The Drakmorian stopped. His breathing vents fluttered. "Wait, you knew this entire time?" "Knew what?" "You knew that you could invoke honor service instead of combat?" Cressida's expression didn't change. "I know a lot of things." "Then why did you let this proceed to a public hearing?" "You touched my holster." "As a greeting, without asking." Zarketh's tail lashed once. "So this entire ordeal, the reports, the detention, the public spectacle. Consequences," Cressida said calmly. "Maybe next time you'll ask before touching someone's gear." The Drakmorian stood very still. His scales were cycling through colors so rapidly it looked like a strobe effect. His armored plating flared and retracted repeatedly. His breathing sounded like a malfunctioning engine. "You," he said slowly, "are terrifying." "Thank you." Barnaby was staring at his datapad like it had personally betrayed him. "So we're not dueling?" "Nope," Cressida said. "We're resolving this through honor service. File the paperwork." "I've been working on duel paperwork for 18 hours. Sounds rough." "I didn't sleep. That's unfortunate." Barnaby made a sound like a small pressure valve releasing. Then he started typing furiously, muttering about forms and regulations and why he'd ever taken this job. The crowd began dispersing, some looking disappointed, others looking relieved, all looking confused. Zarketh remained on the platform, his scales finally settling into a steady emerald tone. His tail had uncurled, draped loosely now. His golden eyes fixed on Cressida with something between respect and absolute terror. "Instructor," he said carefully, "when does my honor service begin?" "Tomorrow, Weapons Bay, 0600. I will be there." "I know." The Drakmorian paused. "May I ask you something?" "Sure. Did you actually read all the orientation materials, or did you just look up my species honor code specifically?" Cressida finally smiled, just slightly. "What do you think?" "I think I will never touch anyone's equipment without asking again." "Good." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Zarketh?" "Yes, instructor?" "Next time you want to greet someone respectfully, try saying hello." She walked away, disappearing into the crowd of dispersing cadets. Zarketh stood alone on the platform, his massive frame somehow looking smaller. His tail dragged across the glowing tape of the unused combat circle. Barnaby finished his frantic typing and looked up. "You all right?" "I am not certain," the Drakmorian said quietly. "I believe I have just learned more about human warfare than in all my previous training combined." "What'd you learn?" "Humans are terrifying." "Yeah," Barnaby said, wiping his forehead one more time. "Yeah, they really are." The fountain burbled cheerfully in the background. The decorative alien plants swayed in the artificial breeze, and somewhere in the distance, Cressida was probably already back to her maintenance logs, entirely unbothered by the chaos she'd orchestrated. Zarketh climbed down from the platform, his digitigrade legs making soft thuds on the stone pathway. His scales gleamed pure emerald in the simulated sunlight. His armored plating had relaxed completely, and his tail swung freely now. "Officer Barnaby," he said as he passed. "Yeah? Do humans like this? This elaborate psychological warfare disguised as bureaucratic procedure?" Barnaby thought about it. "Honestly, I think Cressida just really doesn't like people touching her stuff." "That seems reasonable actually, right?" They stood together for a moment, watching the last of the crowd disperse. "I should prepare for 0600, Zarketh said finally. "Probably a good idea." The Drakmorian walked toward the east entrance, his heavy footsteps echoing across the emptying courtyard. Halfway there, his tail did a little swish that might have been relief, or might have been residual stress, or might have been the physical manifestation of learning a valuable lesson about personal boundaries. Barnaby looked at his datapad, looked at the pile of now useless duel paperwork he'd generated, looked at the combat platform that hadn't been used, looked at the medical station where the medic was already packing up with the weary efficiency of someone whose time had been wasted. "I need a different job," he said to nobody in particular. The fountain, ever cheerful, continued to burble. The weapons training bay at 0600 was exactly as cold and fluorescent as Zarketh remembered. He arrived 7 minutes early, carrying a maintenance kit that looked absurdly small in his massive scaled hands. His emerald and obsidian scales caught the harsh overhead lighting as he stood near the equipment rack, tail coiled nervously. Cressida was already there, naturally, because the universe apparently enjoyed his discomfort. She was drinking something from a thermos and reviewing a datapad, her coffee-stained uniform suggesting she'd either been there all night or simply existed in a perpetual state of mild dishevelment. "Cadet," she said without looking up. "Instructor." Zarketh approached carefully, his digitigrade legs making soft clicks on the rubberized floor. "I am here for honor service. I can see that." He set down the maintenance kit. His breathing vents released a small nervous hiss. "I wish to apologize again. Don't need it, but I must express. You're expressing it by being here at 0600. Cressida finally looked up. "That's the point." Zarketh's scales flickered slightly darker. "I still do not understand why you let it escalate so far. You grabbed my holster, touched, semantics." She gestured to the weapons rack. "Plasma rifle, third from the left, needs full calibration and cleaning. You've got 2 hours." The Drakmorian moved to the rack, his armored plating shifting as he carefully removed the weapon. His tail swayed slightly as he examined it, golden eyes narrowing in concentration. This is actually in very poor condition. I know. How long since it was properly maintained? 6 weeks. 6. Zarketh's breathing vents whistled. Instructor, this is dangerous. The plasma cell could have. Yeah, I've been busy. That's why you're here. He stared at her, then at the rifle, then back at her. You genuinely needed help with maintenance. Turns out having a warrior-class cadet who owes honor service is pretty convenient. This entire incident taught you about boundaries and got me free labor. Everybody wins. Zarketh's scales cycled through 3 different shades before settling on resigned emerald. He carried the rifle to a maintenance station, both arms working with surprising delicacy for something his size. Humans are terrifying, so I've been told. They worked in silence for several minutes, Cressida reviewing reports while Zarketh methodically disassembled the rifle. His tail had uncurled now, draped loosely across the floor. His movements were precise, professional, the actions of someone who actually knew what they were doing. Cadet, Cressida said eventually. Yes, instructor. Next semester, if you want to greet someone respectfully, what are you going to do? Zarketh didn't look up from the plasma cell he was calibrating. Say hello like a normal person. Good. And possibly bring them a beverage. Even better. His scales lightened to pure emerald. I am learning. Yeah, Cressida said, returning to her datapad. You really are. Outside, the academy was waking up. Cadets shuffling to early classes. The Habitat Dome's weather simulation beginning its daily cycle. The sound of distant training exercises echoing across the compound. In the weapons bay, a terrified Drakmorian warrior learned about proper greeting etiquette while a human instructor enjoyed her second beverage of the morning, and somewhere in his cramped office, Barnaby was probably still crying over paperwork. The universe continued its usual chaos. Some lessons just required more bureaucracy than others.